Hey Collective, it's Alan coming to you with a video that will be accompanying a post I'm releasing on LinkedIn that I thought was going to be a standalone post, but when I actually looked at the finished product, I actually was very tickled by it and moved to actually do a video for YouTube that would be like an accompaniment to it. And basically at the center of it was that I became very tickled with the product, and it reminded me of why I'm such a fan of being a writer, and specifically what's so great about being a creative type of mindset is that sometimes you look at the world through different lenses, and some of them can be very, very rewarding to the person writing it and also possibly to the reader or to the viewer of whatever the content is. And this particular piece tickled me so much that I wanted to do this video. And at the center of it was this idea that we can sometimes see something daily that we almost take for granted. It's part of the scenery or somehow part of the backdrop of the universe that we live in. And you don't often really pay a lot of attention to it, except during spectacular displays of some sort of coloring or something. And what had caught my eye specifically was this particular piece stems from last week when we had the full moon, the supermoon. I think it was called the harvest moon or the fall moon or whatever it was, and how it correlated to the equinox. And being that I'm a spiritualist, as many of you know, I believe that nothing in the Great Earth Academy is ever here by accident, and that in truth it holds some layer of truth or an answer to something that we are seeking if you are indeed a seeker of spiritual knowledge. And so as I was looking at the moon, I started to really analyze the dynamic that exists between the sun and the moon. And there was an original thought that I had somehow gotten when I was younger, that the sun and moon were almost like a Romeo and Juliet type of scenario, where it was constantly the charioteer, him and the sun being the divine masculine, chasing the divine feminine, the mysterious, alluring one, and they were constantly moving in a circle. But what I finally realized during the supermoon was something very interesting, is that I realized suddenly, which was the center of the written piece, something that I thought was very interesting, which is what made me ever think that that was the truth? Because it almost made it like there was a tension-built dynamic between the sun and the moon, where they never were at the same place at the same time. And during this particular full moon, I realized that is complete falsity, because there's always sunrise and sunset somewhere on our planet. And so technically they were always in tandem with each other. And it romanticized the idea of the spiritual prowess of the idea behind the esoteric belief of how one becomes two, then two becomes three. And I suddenly saw the universe in a much more crystallized fashion, and the piece basically stemmed from that ideology and my understanding it from a different perspective, which was technically, if you really look at the Earth as a school or an academy, it is the byproduct of the energy that comes from the sun and the moon. It's the tension between the two that I originally thought put them at odds, but then in deeper reflection, I realized always had them in tandem, like they were on a bike together. They were always in love and chasing each other. And I realized it was an immortalization of the truest love form ever known to man, which is the great divine masculine and divine feminine coming into harmony with each other, and the byproduct being the Earth, right? Because if you look at the Earth through scientific lens, you realize that at the core, the Earth is the sun. It's a ball of lava, and it resembles a lot like Dad, like the sun itself. But on the surface, the tides and everything is ruled by the moon. And it is their connection, their union, their love that kind of begets everything that we go through, right? Because when you look at the moon, we're known that wolves will howl at the moon, and it controls the tides by the ocean currents, something that kind of covers the majority of the surface of the planet. And I started to really see the power dynamic that was happening between the ultimate power couple, that they were not indeed separate, but actually in perfect harmony with each other. And that Gaia, Earth, whatever you call our Earth Academy by name, whatever that name is you give it, is actually the child of the two energies, and that it is in their tandem motion that we, as the vessels of light that are microcosmic expressions of this dynamic, are then put into motion, right? It's the tick-tock, tick-tock. It's the clock that moves us forward, right? The sun rises and the moon starts to go. And then, but they're always together somewhere on the planet. They're always in communication. They're always moving things along. And I realized there was such symbiotic nature to it, and there's so much beauty to the conversation, that I started to look at it from the lens of us being the microcosmic expressions of those things. And it reminded me of the whole thing that we've been talking about as spiritualists, that we're feeling the sense of a divine union coming into focus, where twin flames are being brought back together. And I suddenly realized the layers upon layers to the topic we were talking about on this one written piece. And I wanted to kind of really explore it in a video form so that people kind of understood it from a much deeper context. Which is, one of the things that we notice about being human is that we find enlightenment and by the rotation of the sun. meaning even plants and every type of soul development that we go through, whether we're minerals, whether we're plants, whether we're animals, whether we're humans, the evolution is we always follow the light. But one of the things that happens is that we have an incredible amount of shadow that we must work through, right? It's the process of co-creation where we have to deal with our own demons and deal with our insecurities and deal with our fears on the human plane, which can sometimes be epitomized by the moon, right? The controlling energy of the tide. But as the two energies become closer to each other and as they identify each other, something very interesting spiritually begins to happen where she, the feminine, because remember, you can be a divine feminine and be a man, and you can also be a divine masculine and be a female. It just depends on the soul signature and what it's more in alignment with, right? Because I have a ballsy chick that's my best friend who's more masculine than I could ever be. So you can understand the construct. So just because I say divine masculine and feminine, understand that it could be anything. Remember, angels and the beings of light are non-binary. I'm not going to get into the whole political conversation, but they are technically non-binary outside of the human shell. And so we as humans have our own alignment to a particular type of position. And so I found it very interesting that when I was analyzing this entire thing in a creative construct, I found it interesting that we then ourselves balance the energies as does the sun and the moon, and that we then operate between the left and right hemisphere of the brain, scientifically speaking, and bring that into harmony so as to walk the middle path. While spiritually speaking, it is the dance between the light side, that seeking enlightenment in its own shadow, understanding that the closer you stand to the light, the bigger the shadow you cast. And it's kind of the immortal dance that the sun and moon represent in our skies every day. And I was tickled by the idea that it's something that we see daily, that many of us just kind of glance over, only to kind of look at it when something spectacular happens. Almost like when the sun sets and suddenly the sky explodes with all these colors, and I realized, well, what is that? What is that if not the consummation of that relationship between them and the beauty that comes from co-creation when you are truly in harmony with the masculine and feminine side of yourself, and how human beings are technically a microcosmic expression of that great love affair, and that many of us believe that we are part of a play or some sort of production where we act this out in smaller ways and in different animal incarnations and so forth. I was very tickled by the whole creativity behind it. And as I sat there really reflecting upon it, I really was fascinated by the fact that we as humans tend to take for granted the Great Earth Academy. And we neglect the fact over dogma and kind of the narrative that exists that we are somehow supposed to be against the earth and that we're supposed to just be about the divine masculine aspect to it. But I realize that becomes toxic masculinity when someone's so driven by masculine energies that it can be very toxic to the people around them. They can become violent or volatile. And so when I was looking at that, I started to realize the progression of spiritual evolution for humans, and I realized that is that not exactly the case for all of us? You can be overly feminine and be toxic and manipulative and evil and, practice dark arts and all this stuff. But you can also be the divine feminine expression of that, which is someone who harmonizes the chaos that comes with insecurity and all this stuff. And they suddenly attract a partner. And the dynamic that happens as that begins to harmonize can be a little bit chaotic for the natural person. And so I was tickled by the idea that the energy was so fluid and was growing so immensely within kind of the collective consciousness that I realized that somebody must be falling in love out there. And that one of you or some of you are coming into your divine unions. But you are struggling with understanding what it is about the other person that is pulling energies and emotions out of you. So here's what I'm going to say. If you are divine masculine, sometimes we get into gender roles and we become very driven by the material world, and we want to ground the energy that we have and we want to prove ourselves, and we do the work in the physical shell only to then later in life begin the process of doing it spiritually and harmonizing the feminine energy that is trying to push through. And that can be really traumatic to people, and it confuses a lot of individuals. But when you begin to attract your divine counterpart, it brings out the energy of the opposing energy, meaning the yin pulls on the yang and the yang pulls the yin. So if you are suddenly finding yourself feeling emotions because you're so grounded in the real world, you're very analytical, very brain driven, and somebody's making you get tickled and making you face your shadow and making you try to be a better person, all this stuff, you may originally have a kind of negative reaction to the divine feminine energy who's just minding her own business, her, him, it, whatever his business, and not really paying attention to you, but they're doing their own thing. And in your analysis of them. You're coming across them because the universe has this way of magically putting them in your algorithm randomly, or somehow introducing you through social media or at a friend circle or a party. You come into contact with them, and suddenly you begin to feel things that you've been trying to suppress if you're the divine masculine. And it's something you just do organically because you're the provider, you're the protector, you've overcome everything you've overcome. And then if you're really well defined, then you sometimes go into hermit mode and you feel like you're always going to be alone, that you're never going to meet the right person for you. And suddenly here comes whatever the vessel of light is that's supposed to be your partner, suddenly enters your sphere of consciousness, and you suddenly start to have to deal with the consequences of the fact that she's just acting as the moon, she, it, him. Is a moon, a child of the moon. So they're pulling the energy out, like the tide. Like the moon controls the tide of our planet. And it controls a lot of emotions. There's higher crime, there's more rage. That's what they say. Police reports always state this. They're on full moons. It's the more chaotic one, and people kind of lose their minds a little bit. Because the moon is pulling something out of you, and is as the luminary of the night sky, it's usually dealing with your shadow, because it's pulling it up so you can look at it. And from there you can build upon the foundation and move forward. But to a divine masculine, there's nothing more annoying than having somebody come into your realm of consciousness and suddenly challenging you, because you suddenly feel all these emotions, and they're not even necessarily equated to the person that's coming into your sphere, but somehow you feel like there might be witchy or something, like they put a spell on you. Again, some of you are falling in love. So let me just clarify this. No, they're not pulling a spell on you. The boss just decided that this is your mate. And you have complete free will whether or not you want to go down the path where you're going to be ultimately happy, have every dream you've ever wanted to manifest with this person. It is entirely up to you. But if you're going to match her vibration, you're going to need to do the work. And so the universe will find ways to make you face yourself. And in that process, there can be a little bit of tension where you feel incorrectly that she is somehow doing something to control you. She, him, it. You, again, genderless, but we're going to go with the feminine. The feminine then comes into your sphere of consciousness. You feel like she's done something because suddenly you finally feel something. And this is super important for divine masculines. There's a difference between being a masculine and just going through your shadow and working through the best you can to be a better person and master yourself. Divine couplings are people who have mastered themselves and who are now coming into union and are bordering on the topic of twin flame dynamic, which is where a soul split in two brings the two halves back together as wholes. There's no missing pieces to either side of the equation, and they're going to do something sacred with that energy and that power that comes to them naturally. But many of the masculines, if they're really ready for the divine feminine energy, will have gone into what we call hermit mode. And kind of think of the sun. The sun is a very luminous energy, but the sun sits in darkness. And I want everybody to think about what that means. It is surrounded by a universe. It is the light that comes from the core when ignited by the feminine. The masculine that engulfs in passion and a lot of power comes from the inner core of the being, but they came from the darkness, right? The universe is dark. The luminaries are stars. They're very important, like light posts. But at the end of the day, they exist in a paradox of darkness. And so understand that when the divine feminine, whatever gender it is, enters your sphere of consciousness, it can trigger something that you didn't expect, which is for a lot of divine masculines, they believe, especially if they're past life priests or shamans or mystics or oracles or whatever the dynamic was, you may still be under the conditioning that you are not allowed to fall in love, that it is forbidden. Only to discover that the universe, God, the great architect, is blessing you with your reward cycle by bringing you the answer to your prayers. But you still have to do the work. And that's kind of the message of what the sun and the moon mean to me, now looking at the finished written product and then looking at the video, is that you have to understand that we still have to do the work on ourselves continuously because we are perpetual students. Even the master teacher is still a student. They're still studying something. It's just at a different vibration or a different level. But they're still always going to be students. That's why teachers still go to ongoing school every year to keep up with the latest. So understand that you're still going to grow. But there are masculines out there who are a little confused and maybe feeling as though the divine feminine, whatever gender it was, did something to bewitch you. No. If you are divine feminine or divine masculine, you will report to the great architect, God, whoever you believe in white light. There's no darkness allowed near you. What you're feeling is the pull of them loving and healing the things that you are now having to deal with. Sometimes you need another person to heal things that are out of your control, and you can't do anything about it. But your close proximity to the moon, whoever the feminine is, will bring that out of you because the feminine will organically heal it by coming near you, touching your heart, playing with your hair, soothing your mind, not doing anything witchy, but actually having the blessing of the universe and the great architect to somehow be something that helps you heal some stuff that you can't heal on your own. And so it can be a little jarring to a masculine who is on the divine path, who has gone into solitude, to suddenly realize, oh, it is possible for me to be in love? Wait, I can do that this lifetime? And it's a bit of a shock. But it also can create a little bit of tension that doesn't necessarily need to be there. And when I was looking at this whole process of the sun and the moon, I realized that the sun itself exploded with passion at some point along its journey. But it might have been another star or whatever the hell it is. I don't know the dynamics. I'm not one of those people, but you understand it from this philosophical and metamorphosis way. Something ignited him, and in that, he realized that him was worth it. And they went through the journey. But many of us get lost in the idea that we have to be alone because it becomes comfortable. The greatest fear that any of us can have is falling in love and being afraid of being heartbroken. It is the one thing that can destroy the most level-headed human being on planet Earth, but it is the ultimate quest of all souls. The reuniting with the ultimate one requires you to first come back whole as your twin, as your dynamic between the masculine and feminine energies. And so it can play out like guy, girl, guy, girl, usually, but it's going to vary depending on how the souls were brought apart, right? We're going into mythology now. But you can understand the energy and the dynamic and the confusion that can play when just someone comes into your awareness and suddenly you start to feel things for someone you don't really know, but you're starting to understand the dynamic at play, and so you have to understand that they haven't done anything to you. You are being blessed with your soulmate. You're being blessed with your twin flame. You are being blessed as the son of the sun with the son or daughter of the moon. And you guys are going to build something gorgeous together. And so to the divine feminines, here's what I'm going to say. There is a narrative, sorry, it's a little hot in here, I'm not putting the fan. I'm not stopping. But there's a little narrative that's going on about how much the divine feminines have had to go through this incarnation. And I just wanted to address it in a very, very loving, compassionate way. It is true that you've had a crash course that the divine masculines may not have. And when the divine masculine finally understands who you are, that they are going to ascend very quickly. But it's not because you had to get a PhD in it so much, it's that you weren't allowed before to reach certain schools and certain frames of thought. And women were kind of subjugated as a secondary class citizen for a very long time on this planet. And it's this incarnation where you guys are rising very quickly back to where you belong, right? The Mary Magdalenes of the situation. It was Mary Magdalene who carried the message of Jesus after he died. Like, there's a lot of energy that's catching itself up, and you are experiencing it. So though you may feel like the divine masculine is not having to go through the same level of training, and you feel like you have the PhD and he doesn't, understand that he has been on this path, incarnation after incarnation after incarnation after incarnation. He has been able to move up in the ascension ladder a lot more easily than you have. Remember, it's only recently that we even have women that are able to lead churches. This is brand new to this life cycle. So it's not that you're getting a PhD and they don't have it, you're somehow more gifted than he is. It's just that he's been on the path as a soul for a lot longer than you have been allowed to join the conversation. So understand that it's not so much that you have a PhD that they don't have, because they wouldn't match you if that was true. You have to understand that you're just having to play catch up because they're finally opening the doors to women. They're finally letting the divine feminine in, because in the end, it is the balance between the masculine and feminine energies that lead co-creation. It's what expands the universe. And it answers so many questions to us. But you are the first incarnation that's actually actively, while alive, being granted access, thanks to the internet and so forth, to the higher realms of consciousness. There's informational things that you were kept out of that you are now catching whiff of, and you're going to have to go through the testing phases and everything that they've been doing over a lifetime after lifetime, and you're doing it in one lifetime. So don't let your toxic ego get into the conversation where you feel like you have a PhD and they don't. No. They do too. Be very aware of the masculine energy. They're not just providers, but if they're providers for you, then they have to have the same knowledge, experience, and they have to match you and mirror you. You are no better than either one. And remember, we're harmonizing energy, and that's what the piece was. But as you can see, it started off so innocently with just an aside about how I finally realized that the sun and moon weren't in opposition of each other. They actually are never apart. They are the epitome of the divine masculine and feminine energies working together. And the entirety of our school is built upon that tandem dynamic. It's the balancing of it. And the indication of the school is that when you come into union with your counterpart, whether it is a human being, if you're straight, if you have that ability, or if you're a gay couple, what you co-create as far as, I don't know, podcasts, or something that you create as far as something creative or entertaining, whatever the product is from the union of the two harmonizing will be magnificent to the world around you. It is a blessing from the big JC and the big MM. But you have to understand that it's clouded in mystery because it's not so common to have this many students coming into union with each other. And it's usually a sign of us heading home soon. But that doesn't mean we don't get to experience a reward cycle. And so understand that there's a lot of dynamics playing at the same time that we are witnessing the world coming into harmony. And you're going to trigger other people. Remember, there's nothing more annoying to a person who has sold his soul to the devil or who can't keep his pecker in his pants and keeps cheating on his wife than one of his friends finding the love of his life and being inseparable. It's nothing they have to work on. They neither one lose freedom because both of you are going to be hella independent. In fact, you might have a little bit of tension about having to balance that energy out. But my impression is that you will find unity quickly. And you will kind of almost come into such a union with each other that you want to be with each other all the time. This is your best friend, your lover, your companion, your husband, your wife. These people aren't just a size. These are the main course. And so be aware that you will then trigger other people who have not done the work. Not your problem. Understand the way the sun and moon operate. It's not worried about how the rest of the cosmic universe is looking at it. All it knows is that its harmony has brought the world, what we call Earth, into manifestation. And through many, many cycles and many, many attempts, we are but byproducts of microcosms of that macrocosm. And as we bring ourselves into harmony with our partners, as we exit the academy, going off into whatever immortality is, if that's what's granted, then understand that you're going to trigger other people. And for the masculine, this is really important. Because the feminine, I think it's because the feminine is very used to the moon and understands backstabbing behavior, it has a little bit more street smarts. It understands motivations, it can see the emotional range of someone else and can feel it energetically. So to the masculine, be advised that the feminine is going to see and know things that at first you may not know about other people around you. And my advice is to be aware that they are worth it and that what they're trying to warn you is something that you may not be able to see because you're so concrete into the 3D. But the divine feminine is ruled by the moon for the most part. And the moon controls the shadow. So if anybody's going to know the shadow, it's going to be the feminine. Ulterior motives will be known by the feminine, divine feminine. The divine masculine will be more concrete in the 3D. Feminines. Be advised the masculine will see enemies of people. It will see strategy. It will see analytical issues, holes, and it will bring the best of you out. But you're going to have to leave your comfort zone a little bit and take on some of the more masculine traits in the process. You can be a wallflower, right? What does Missy say over at Saltwater Tower? She says the flower does not dream of the bee. When it blossoms, the bee will come. It's that simple. And a lot of people are coming into the realization that that's a very true statement. You're not trying to actively do anything to entice the other person. Most of you, from what I can feel, already know this person. They're just suddenly realizing who you are. And they're going to have to deal with the emotional ramifications when they're not liking emotions. Whereas the feminine is going to have to set aside some of her emotions and possibly part ways from family, from people who are jealous and stuff like that, which is not comfortable because the feminine typically is about the home and the masculine is typically about protection and about everything else. So as these walls start to come down a little bit, you're going to have to trust each other. And one of the things I've noticed about the sun and the moon is that they are never in opposition of each other and are constantly supportive of each other. And here's what I mean. The moon, when it's full, the glow that we see is a reflection of the sun. And when the sun is at the highest peak, sometimes in the afternoon, what do you see in the background? The moon. They are always with each other in some way, shape, or form. They're never truly in opposition. They just guide different vessels of light in different ways. If you really want to play with the idea, just think of it this way. Some people are the son of the sun. Really outgoing angels are, those really great beings that have never had any shadow. And then there's the school, which is the hybrid between the two, and then the fallen ones who are all shadow. So there are 3 different band camps. But those who have had to go through the school have had to face their shadow as they ascend back up to whatever you believe in. When you leave the academy, either you come back or you won't come back. But for those of you who are understanding why this particular piece is so important and why it tickled me so, it's because it was so layered upon the twin flame journey and the soulmate journey. Because you're coming back into union with your best friend and the person that you are meant to have the best life cycle you've ever had. Many of you will find that you have souls that have been persecuted, that you have had souls that have been somehow victimized. And by the time that you come into contact with the proper sun alignment and the proper moon alignment, you have overcome it. And now what you're going to do is new levels, new devils. You're going to be dealing with other things that are not about necessarily you individually, but you're starting the process of understanding the we complex, where you are now in tandem with another human being, right? The sun and the moon are never apart. So you're going to go through the awkward stage of trying to understand what your boundaries are, and you need to set them, but you need to be also very gentle with each other because you are the other person's dream. You both dreamed of each other, and you've both been waiting for each other. You just got tired of waiting for each other. And what you did is many of us began to lose hope and stopped trying to go out and stopped trying, because we just thought it wasn't in the cards for us. A lot of us who are divine union people have just relinquished all control and go where the wind and where the air takes us, drift like the clouds, right? And so we've understood that it may not happen for us. And in that release, you sometimes don't realize that that's what attracts him or her, whatever the dynamic is. And so understand that you're going to have a short dance, but they are your answer to your quest. You can get all the money in the world. You can be the most gifted spiritual being on the planet. But an Al statement of advice as a brother or a friend is nothing trumps love. Nothing. If you have the opportunity to come into union with your divine counterpart and have the opportunity to build something sacred with that person, do not let anyone around you sway you from that path. Because they're not being blessed. That's not your problem. You've done the work. The people I'm talking to have been celibate for a while. They have stopped overindulgences. They have been in hermit mode or hermitess mode, whatever it is. They are super intuitive. They can feel each other, and they know that this is the right person. But there is no greater fear than to lose the person of your dreams. But you have to get over that for this. We're running out of time. And what I will say is, if you are never willing to do the most uncomfortable thing, which is allow yourself to truly be seen and to be loved, then you will forever be tied to the karmic wheel and you will keep coming back to the Earth Academy. Because it is the one anchor that all souls want to experience. They want the dream. They want to have the partner. I don't care how much money you have. I don't care what your title is. None of that makes any difference to divine unions. You are both walking around with badges that you can't even see and a crown probably you can't even notice. The other person might be able to see it, but you won't. And you wouldn't believe them anyway because that's not your motivation. But there's no greater fear than to truly be loved by another person and to open yourself up to the possibility that they can hurt you. It's the only doorway to meet the person who won't hurt you. So do not be swayed by everyone around you that is going to be triggered by your sudden shift and your sudden changes, where you suddenly start to work on yourself and you start to really, really pull away from people who are toxic. Why would you go, and this is a conversation from a son to the sons, why would you go to somebody who cheats on their wife for love advice? You're not that person. A divine union would never cheat on each other. In fact, just to solve a problem here for those of you masculine energies, there's a difference between being protective and being possessive. Make sure with a divine feminine that you are not possessive, because she will snap it. She'll break it. No tolerance for that. But protective, fully respond well to it. Absolutely. That's exactly what you're supposed to do as far as the divine feminine is concerned. So understand that there are going to be power plays of people around you who are going to try to agitate the dynamic because either they're jealous that you have the love of your life or that you were brave enough to face your greatest fear, which is to lose the love of your life. But it's a trick, because if you're not willing to take that chance, then you can never have the one who never will hurt you. Some of you, especially if you're a divine union, will exit the academy with these people, with your partners. And you will go on into immortality, whatever you believe that happens in the afterlife. But you will leave in love permanently with this soul. It will be your greatest accomplishment, and for many of you, it's part of your graduation, because you will never be tied to the Earth Academy again. If you come down here, maybe a favor, there are souls that are teachers dressed as students right now that are helping the collective make this transition, and some of you are them. But you won't ever be obligated to come down here. And so understand that the greatest sacrifice you can make is your ego. And your ego is terrified of being left behind. It's terrified of being hurt. It is the epitome of the devil having its playground within you. And I'm supposed to remind you that the sun and the moon prove that it is not only possible, but there's an immortality that lives in that dynamic. Don't let anyone sway you from the path that you're on, because some of you are going to meet the dream of everyone, and that will be your mate. And you're going to have reactions to them that may seem odd. For example, I was told in a dream once that my partner is the most non-possessive person on the planet, not the jealous type whatsoever, and that for whatever reason he's going to be a little bit more jealous with me, and it's going to drive him nuts, and it's going to piss me off. But to understand that it's not part of his normal character, and as long as it's in check, that I just need to understand that it is a natural progression of the protective edge that comes from the masculine looking at the feminine. And somehow in this, I don't know how I ended up as the feminine in this dynamic, but whatever. I mean, when it comes to fistfights, I'm the one you're going to go to, but whatever. I have to play the part, and the truth is that I am a warrior, and I'm kind of tired of being the warrior. It would be nice to have somebody fucking protect my ass for once, you know? And I think a lot of divine feminines are going through that. We've never been able to breathe. We've never been able to do anything where we're not always on guard. And this person is going to trigger us because they represent the one person that we don't have to have our shell up. We can walk around with, for those of you who are actually female, no makeup. For those of you who are guys, like, you can walk around, like, it's just going to be so harmonized. There's not going to be any effort. And that's one of the signs that you are part of this divine level of vibration, which is you don't really have to do anything. It's going to be like you're with your friend. But a friend like you've never known in this, you're going to feel familiarity with them. You're going to bond on all the important things, and it won't be any kind of tension to it. Although I'll say for me personally, if you're my partner, some of you may be connected to a person that I absolutely will not let in my house whatsoever. I don't care who it is, and I will never let them near my children. So if you're one of those people that's like a high-profile person, just know that I do have a boundary about certain people who I know work for the devil. I'm not doing it. But having said that, that's just my personal thing. But I have a feeling that my partner would understand that and wouldn't even think twice about it. So understand that some of the conflict that you're building in your head that you feel is going to be a struggle is not real. The struggles you're going to have is how much you love each other, and understanding that you have individual voices and that you have individual tasks. And specifically with the divine masculines, remember, some of the divine feminines are going to be doing things that help heal other people. And some of what they're doing is going to have to deal with the public, especially if they're high-profile people. I don't know who you are, or I don't know if I'm one of you, but understand that they're going to be administering to everyday people. You cannot walk into a situation and overreact and go into a jealous rage and stop the feminine from doing her job. In the same way that the feminine absolutely cannot do the same thing to the masculine. Because then you stop doing your divine mission, and the divine will step in and it will be done, and that's it. Right? You have a blessing. If you are in sun-moon alignment, if you are understanding what's happening, you are being blessed with your soulmate, your twin flame, the ultimate ideal for any human being. And they are super powerful as you are. and you will mirror each other. So make sure that you check the toxicity before they come into it and realize that they are waiting for you to make the first move if they're the feminine. And if you're the feminine, you cannot be jealous of people they're talking to, because that wouldn't be a divine union. A divine union is one person chooses another person, that's it. It's like dolphins or like penguins, that's it. No one else. And masculine needs to understand as you're coming into this union, just the way the sun does, that the sun has dark spots and it also has flare-ups. Just make sure you direct the energy properly and not to your feminine, right? Because she still has job responsibilities to do as a being. And she's still going to have to interact with the general population in order to be an accomplished person. So don't take away her mission in life, because then the divine himself will have to intervene and course correct everybody, and no one needs that drama. So understand that some of the things that you're going to be facing with each other has less to do with you individually, because you're already harmonized and you're already attracted to each other because you heal each other. Understand that it's going to be external forces to try to manipulate that energy in order to coerce you into an argument or to try to break it apart. People, for some reason, they would rather destroy something sacred than to appreciate it. And it isn't until they're at the right vibration that they can look at the sun and the moon and go, oh, they're not in opposition. They've never been apart. They're the ultimate union. And from their union, Earth came to be. This school that we are part of. We are the microcosm of that energy. We are the sons and daughters of that energy. It is the big JC and the big MM, and they're together. And their focus is in lifting us all up. And so if you're part of that mission, understand that there are energies, the Judases, the devils, all those people who might be jealous because it doesn't make sense to them. They don't understand how you can pick one mate. And meanwhile, that's all you want is one fucking person. They don't get that. They don't understand how you can walk away from making millions of dollars. Why? If I got my man, I don't give a fuck about the money. Like I can be homeless. As long as I'm with my mate, I don't need your value. You see what I'm saying? So there's like so much moral and ethical fiber to both of you that you're just going to have to be very conscious that you are facing the universe. And it doesn't need to be as traumatic as you are. You just need to be aware. And when you're aware, you see things differently. And one day you might just come across a video on that day and you'll realize that something you've been looking at your entire life is not in opposition, but are actually in love and have created everything you see around you. And on that day, you will understand you're ready to finally meet the love of your life, and you will become the embodiment in human form of those souls. Have a good day. Bye.